Hey gang, what's good? Welcome to yet another Morrowind Mechanics video guide. This time we're covering the game's user interface. That's vaguely a game mechanic, right? The goal of this particular video is to offer up several, essentially tips regarding using the game's base UI. These are things that either wouldn't really fit into other more focused guides, or might simply be glossed over. Keep in mind that if you're using one of the many mods which alter your UI, your mileage with this guide may vary. Anyways, as always, I'll have timestamps in the description if you want to look ahead just for specific functionality that you aren't already aware of. Alright, in case you're brand new to the game, let's first begin with the basics, your heads-up display. Starting from the bottom left and beside your health, magicka, and fatigue gauges. I'm assuming we don't need to go over what those are. Anyways, next to them, you'll see a couple of icons with small red gauges under each of them. The left icon essentially represents your currently equipped weapon, and the right represents your currently equipped magicka. Now, I say essentially because that's a bit of a loose generalization. The red gauge beneath the left icon measures your current weapon's durability. This is important because your weapon damage scales off of its current durability. Refer to my melee or ranged combat guides if you want more on that. Now, similarly, if you equip a probe or lockpick, the red gauge measures their durability as well. Don't confuse that for your lockpicking chance. And, of course, if you opt for hand-to-hand combat, the gauge will always be empty, being as your fists have unlimited durability. Now, the red gauge beneath the right magicka icon measures your success chance at casting your equipped spell. Mind you that if you lack the magicka needed to cast a spell, the gauge will be empty, rather than displaying your cast chance if you did have sufficient magicka. If you've equipped an on-use enchanted item as a spell, then it will display here as well. Since enchanted items are always guaranteed to fire off when used, the red gauge simply instead displays the enchanted item's current charge level. Now, above your 3 resource gauges on the left, there's a 4th hidden yellow-colored gauge. This gauge only appears in combat situations and measures the health of the last enemy you attacked. I should point out that if for whatever reason you're playing a completely basic version of Morrowind, without any expansion content or patches, you won't have access to this enemy health gauge. Okay, in the bottom right of our HUD, we've got a mini-map and our buff or debuff icons. Unless you've got a strong memory, you'll be hard-pressed to get much out of just seeing the buff icons. That said, I think it can be a good way to tell, at a glance, whether you've been diseased or not. Just keep an eye out for an out-of-place red debuff. With the standard HUD out of the way, let's move on to the menus, or, as the game refers to it, menu mode. By default, you should have 4 different menus available. You can pin a menu to your HUD by clicking the button in the top right of each menu. It can be easy to miss if you aren't looking for it. Anyways, this lets you see these menus when you're actually playing the game. When you pin one of these menus, their corresponding HUD element is temporarily disabled. Simply unpin the menu to get back the default HUD element. Many of these pinned menus offer more information than their standard HUD defaults, like the map menu or the character stat menu, so consider resizing and pinning them. Now, while you're fiddling with your menus, you may accidentally cause one to disappear entirely. This is because you double-clicked on one of their window headers, or single-clicked on their corresponding HUD element. To get said menu to display once again, just simply click on its corresponding HUD element. Now, let's cover some of the hidden functionality of each menu, starting with the inventory. Perhaps the most simple is that you can just drag items out of your inventory menu and into the game world. If where you click in the game world is close enough to your character, you'll place the item right there. useful for decorating or moving many heavy items short distances. Mind you that you can do the inverse of this, moving items in the game world around or into your own inventory while in menu mode. But be careful, as moving items in this way does technically add said item to your inventory. So if you do this to an item owned by someone else, you'll be fined for stealing if there's any witnesses. Another hidden functionality of the inventory menu is the ability to move a single item or an entire stack of items at once without needing to go through the slider prompt menu to pick an amount to grab. Holding Control while left-clicking selects a single unit from a stack, and holding Shift while left-clicking selects the entire stack. Mind you that this also works in bartering menus. Special thanks to gentle viewer Jack Caboose for this one. I should point out also that the unofficial Morrowind code patch features an option to make this the default form of item selection, so that means that holding Shift would bring up the slider prompt instead. Now, moving on, the Magicka menu has one bit of hidden functionality as well, the ability to permanently delete a spell from your spell book. It's useful if your spellbook is getting crowded due to older spells taking up real estate. To delete a spell, all you've got to do is hold Shift and left-click whatever you want to get rid of. And don't worry, the game offers you a prompt so that you don't accidentally delete the wrong spell. Finally, the map menu has our last bit of hidden functionality, at least as far as menu mode is concerned. When you toggle your map to local, you can double-click on areas to create a small red waypoint. Unfortunately, you can only ever see it on this local map, and not in-game, nor on your world map, nor your mini-map on your HUD by default. But it may be of use to you if you find yourself getting lost a lot. Okay, now taking a step further from hidden functionality, we have a hidden menu to cover. I don't believe the game teaches you about this menu at all during the opening tutorial, so the only way I think you could ever know it even exists is through stumbling upon it while editing your key bindings. Well, this hidden menu is none other than the Quick Keys menu, or hotkeys as most PC players will recognize it. By default, you can bring up this menu by pressing the F1 key. This allows you to bind items and spells to your 1 through 0 keys just like you'd expect. Albeit, it's a little bit clunky by today's standards. For being such a useful system, it's a little crazy that they didn't think to tutorialize new players fully in its use. The last part of the UI we'll be covering is the journal. At a glance, it's super finicky for actually tracking your current quests. Fortunately, if you're playing a version of the game with the expansion content, you can click the Options button on the left of your journal and get access to all of your current quests and completed quests. A little funky that such a useful journal filter is listed under Options, but it can, nonetheless, be a lifesaver if you're returning to an old save file or looking to finish up old quests that you picked up early on. Well, that ought to do it for everything regarding Morrowind's user interface and all of its hidden gems, so to speak. If you happen to know something I didn't cover, absolutely feel free to leave a comment. I always welcome addendums or corrections or whatever, with arms wide open. And, of course, be sure to have a look at the rest of my ever-expanding collection of Morrowind guides. I've also got a weekly max difficulty Morrowind playthrough chugging right along. Give that a look too, if you're down with those sorts of videos. Thanks for tuning in. Peace.